Our next decision regarding what to do with productive capacity in the short run relates to process further decisions. Now, this decision occurs when two or more products emerge from a process, and then the managers have two choices. They can sell the product as is when the product emerges from the process, or they can incur additional costs and sell after further processing. So this is just something that naturally happens in some manufacturing situations. You'll put in one set of costs and two or more products will emerge from the process. Now, the point where the products split off and go their own way is called the split off point. And at that point, the products can be sold or put into further processing. An example of this would be the oil industry. They put in crude oil, which of course costs money. And from that process, they naturally get out of there things like gasoline, kerosene, and then other products such as lubricants and naphtha and different plastic type materials. Now, the decision we're going to be looking at is when gasoline emerges, do we want to process it further into high octane gas? If we do that, of course, we'll incur additional cost. The term joint cost is used to describe the cost incurred up to the split off point. So in our example, that would be the cost of the crude oil. The thing you need to remember about joint costs is that in the decision to process further, these are not relevant. Think about it. The cost of the crude oil will not change if you sell gas or high octane gas. It's going to be the same. In other words, for this particular decision, it is a sunk cost. Our decision rule is pretty simple. We will process further if the extra revenues generated exceed the extra costs incurred. Here's our example. Northwest Sawmill buys logs and then runs them through a saw that produces unfinished lumber and scrap, that is sawdust, chips, and bark. Joint costs are allocated on the basis of weight. The unfinished lumber can be sold as is or processed further into finished lumber. The scrap can also be sold as is to gardening supply wholesalers or processed further into Presto logs. Data concerning these joint products appear below. So what we know is that at split off, we can sell the lumber for $140 and the scrap for $5. If we decide to process into treated lumber, it would sell for $270, and scrap, if processed into Presto logs, would sell for $20. The joint costs have been allocated based on weight. $176 is allocated to lumber and $24 is allocated to scrap. These are the sunk costs. They're not going to change regardless of the decision that we make. The additional processing cost to get from lumber to treated lumber is $50, and to go from scrap to Presto logs is $16. Should the company sell after split off or process further? I'll remind you of what was given here at the top of the screen, and then we'll do our analysis separately for each product line, trying to decide, should we go from lumber to treated lumber, and should we go from scrap to Presto logs? We start by comparing the revenue. If we process further, we can sell the treated lumber for $270, and we can sell the Presto logs for $20. If we had decided to sell lumber and scrap instead of processing further, the sales generated would have been $140 for lumber and $5 for scrap. So the difference in the two alternatives is incremental revenue of $130 if we go to treated lumber and $15 if we go to Presto logs. We'll now compare that to the extra cost we will incur. That's the further processing costs of $50 and $16. So the result is profit from further processing will be $80 if we go from lumber to treated lumber, and -1 if we go from scrap to Presto logs. So based on this information, we would process lumber further and sell it as treated lumber, and we would sell scrap as is. We would not make Presto logs unless there were some other reason that might have us believe it's a good idea to do this. That's it for this decision. So it's a pretty simple analysis of looking at what extra revenue do we get versus what extra cost do we incur.